So they might still have a lot of tantrums because of changes in routine. And right now, all of our routines are, we're trying to maintain routine as much as possible, but are still very off. Next. So middle children, ages 5 to 6, they may be starting to become more social, more conversational. Next. But they are still testing boundaries and on the one hand, eager to please and help out, but maybe starting to become a little bit more defiant. Next. So ages 7 to 8, they're starting to be aware of maybe how other people feel and think about things. Next. And so they have this desire to please, but they may not always be paying attention to directions because they're starting to take in more of the world around them. Next. And then still may resort to aggression when they can't adequately name their feelings. Next. And then in this age 9 to 10 range, they are starting to develop more of their own identity and may not want to be with their parents as much, which may be a little bit of a surprise to parents. Next. Next slide. And then adolescents are really the age range who seem to be struggling in particular right now, and thinking about kind of younger adolescents. Next. They may be starting to become more moody. This may be related to hormonal and physical changes. They may want really more privacy, or starting to kind of self-reflect and be more introspective. Next. And they're really starting to seek out, and explore friend groups. And this is something that may be difficult for parents to navigate, especially depending on how rigidly parents are wanting to and or able to enforce. Next. And then older adolescents are really starting to separate more from caregivers. Next. And kind of oscillate between both wanting their parents and needing them and needing their support, and then appearing to be very self-centered and impulsive or moody. At the same time, maybe more capable of kind of, more abstract thought and more independence. And so that push-pull and that kind of vacillation can be confusing for parents. Next. So in addition to these very normal developmental milestones, socially and emotionally, there can be significant things that get in the way, in particular learning differences, having past experiences of chronic stress and trauma, thinking about how, this imposition of a quarantine may feel very top down in terms of how rules are being created. And so if you've experienced past stress and trauma, this can be difficult for children, teens, and caregivers alike. Next. For various reasons, having difficulty regulating your emotions may also create additional barriers. Next. And then related to learning differences and or, significant anxiety, maybe cognitively a little bit more rigid. Next. And then of course, with any additional attentional or impulse control problems that being cooped up inside all day, especially if having time outdoors or time for usual physical activities is not as possible. And in particular, kids with attentional and impulse control problems are, more vulnerable to the really increased screen time that we're all experiencing right now. Next. So I really love the work of Dan Siegel. He comes from a very attachment-based perspective, and also really embeds a lot of neuroscience in his work. And he's written several books that are very accessible, and also has quite a lot out on the web that's very readily available. And at this point, I just wanted to share a 1-minute video of some of his work explaining the upstairs, downstairs brain. I'm going to share this.
People have told us is so revolutionary about a whole brain child approach is that actually you can teach your child about how the brain works. So you have diagrams available to you and even a hand model of the brain where you can show your child that there are lower parts of the brain, the downstairs brain, and there are higher parts of the brain just behind your forehead that allow them to think clearly. When kids actually can see the brain in their hand, they begin to learn what it feels like to use the upstairs brain when it's reasonable, when it's thinking, when it's being flexible, and when the other parts of the brain, the lower parts of the brain, are taking over. So when a child can see this, they can see when they're flipping their lid, and they could say, I need to take a time out because I'm about to flip my lid. And you can teach them how to bring their upstairs brain back in line, use it more, and actually connect with themselves and with others in a more rewarding kind of way.
So maybe if we can put the PowerPoint back up, please. Great. So these are just some pearls that are, you can do a deeper dive. Many of Dan Siegel's videos are available on YouTube and or on Facebook, but some specific things that are really nice in here are to connect and then to redirect. So this might look like, being able to get on the level with the child, asking them, can you look at me with your listening eyes, making sure that they're making eye contact. And this is true for all of us across all ages, right? If we can make eye contact, if we can truly connect and understand more of what's going on, then that automatically brings regulation and calming. And one of his books is called No Drama Discipline, and the intention in the word discipline is it has kind of negative connotations sometimes, but it actually means to teach. And so thinking about these different moments as teachable moments. Name it to tame it. We know from research that if we can name our feelings, that automatically has a very regulating effect if we can give expression to them. And in kids whose language abilities are not as developed, or if it's just the downstairs part of your brain that's working and not the upstairs part, if your lid is flipped, then you might have a harder time giving words or labels to your feelings, and then it comes out in behaviors and difficult emotions and maybe irrational presentations. So being able to name it helps people make sense of the experience and feel more in control. Engage, don't enrage. So being able to connect, this was developed in particular for teenagers, but being able to, again, connect. Another take on this is be curious, not furious. You may see your child, having made a huge mess, or you may see your teenager, apparently having stolen the car. And before you flip your lid, to be able to ask, hey, what was going on here? Because it very well could have been an accident and not with malintent. And so before you, react yourself, to be able to ask more about why is this happening? What happened right before? Move it or lose it, especially younger children really need to move their bodies, and it is automatically regulating. And I think this is something that's easy to forget, especially kids who are super connected to their devices, younger children, and then suddenly they've been on screens for 6 hours and maybe they've forgotten to eat lunch, and they really need to move their bodies. And then you wonder why when they turn it off, they're cranky and dysregulated and kind of all over the place. And then SIFT, this is really walking through kind of mindfulness. So being able to pay attention to sensations in the moment. What are any images that are coming to mind or that you see in front of you? What are any connected feelings that are associated? And any connected thoughts. But it's a way of guiding your awareness back to the present moment. What's going on for you right here? And then a link here is this refrigerator tip sheet that Dan Siegel has that might be useful, that kind of summarizes each of these. So next slide, please. So wanted to just do a little deeper dive on empathic listening and validation. And validation is a term that we hear a lot about. It's a lot of people just describe it in, in talking every day. And there are some, features to it that that it's worth, really looking at more closely. So the first is just paying attention, putting your phone down, not just kind of mindlessly, And this can be really hard when we have a lot on our minds and, may not be fully focused, but being able to really focus on what our child or teen is saying and and then to reflect it back. Maybe using, a lot of the exact same words that your child or teen used. Reading minds is going a little bit deeper. So being able to say, okay, so it sounds like you were feeling very sad in that moment, and I wonder if you were also feeling something else. And then to validate, saying it's understandable that you would feel this way. And validating the valid is about, it's okay that you feel upset that you missed your graduation, that you didn't get to have the end of your senior year in the way that you really wanted to. It is not okay that you took the car and went out and partied with 10 of your friends and got into trouble with the police, right? But to really validate the feeling behind it, not necessarily the behavior that was not valid. And then being able to just be really real, really in the moment, and not necessarily have that kind of veneer of feeling like you need to act a certain way or have a certain response. And so with this, Joanne and I were gonna pause here and do a little bit of a role play to try and demonstrate some of these things. So, and the setup is that I am a parent, and this is real life for me. This is not really scripted. And Dr. Jung is my pediatrician.
Hello, how are you doing today? What brings you in today?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I feel really, I feel stressed, and I feel worried about my daughter. She is 6 and she is just finishing up kindergarten, and she seems to have been doing, just fine for a few weeks. And then a week ago, we decided to go out for a walk as a family, and she just flipped out. She was so upset, and it was about the fact that she wanted to bring walkie-talkies on the walk, and she would not leave without the walkie-talkies, and she was crying and she was upset. And I set a limit with her and said, we're either going for the walk and we're not bringing the walkie-talkies, or you can go to bed. What would you like to do? And she, was screaming and crying and threw some things. And then I said, I'm leaving right now. I really would like to go on this walk with you, but this is all we can do. And so we started walking, and she at first said, I'm so upset. You said you were going to be home early from work, and I told all my friends on my Zoom call that you were going to be home early, and then you weren't. And I was so embarrassed. I couldn't believe it. And so I said, gosh, I'm so glad you're telling me this, and I'm sorry. I know that you were upset and I didn't realize this. And tell me more about it. And she said a little bit more about how she was embarrassed. And then she said, and I miss my friends, and I miss my teacher, and I miss kindergarten, and it's not fair, and I hate coronavirus. And I was just feeling so guilty and torn, and I feel worried about my mom who's far away, and it feels hard to juggle all this stuff. I'm trying to work and trying to manage all the different meetings for school. And anyway, that's how I'm doing.
I'm hearing a lot of stress, and I'm hearing just maybe some mixed feelings. And I'm wondering if you were feeling guilty at all, or if you were feeling sad, or even worried for your daughter at all.
Yeah, I was. I didn't realize that I needed to be worried, because she never gives me any reason to worry. And then I was worried, and I was sad for her, thinking about missing out on kindergarten and the end of it, and then just thinking about how this is affecting so many people, and feeling guilty for working and not able to spend more time with her. Yeah.
It's really understandable to be feeling this way and to have this wide range of feelings that you went through, and even this kind of difficulty. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of just having way too many balls in the air and maybe feeling like something's slipped away sometimes. But I'm wondering if, just to kind of land this, what you think you can do right now? Is there something in particular that you think might be able to help with with you and your daughter? Like, was like some of the big feelings or some of the stress that was behind it?
I mean, I guess I really recognize the need to spend like a little bit more of that special time and being able to carve things out kind of one-on-one in the way that you were describing. And then just making sure that there's a little bit of time to check in with her about her feelings. And I think, you know, we have the schedule posted, but I wonder if we can also schedule in like maybe some more time for her to connect with her friends and maybe something like that.
That's great. I hope things go better.
Thank you. So thank you. So that was just an effort to kind of look at different parts of validation and to highlight some of the things that we've been talking about. And so maybe we can go on to the next slide. So these are some of the basics of the ABCs of behaviorism, and this may be familiar to folks on the call, but just wanted to highlight, you know, that what we see as the behavior. So like my daughter's, you know, tantrum and kind of throwing things. If I had just walked into that and just seen that, I might think, God, she is a pill. Oh my God, what's going on? And I'm so tired and I'm so stressed, and I just go to bed, right? And I did have that urge to just send her to bed for sure. But what is happening before that, right? Like, what are the antecedent things, events and or conditions that may be happening? So is someone tired? Is it close to bedtime? Is someone hungry? You know, are there other things going on? Are there other things that maybe provoked, you know, more emotion? And so just to highlight that, you know, kids can learn via these mechanisms, and this is what, you know, is the basis for like reward charts and sticker charts and kind of incentivizing things. And also that there's a lot of learning through observation that happens. And that's important for, you know, for all of us as parents, and also for the parents that we work with to be aware of. Next slide, please. This is a something called the collaborative problem-solving approach, and this is put forward. And we won't go into this in a really, you know, deep way, but I wanted to put this here in particular to highlight that. So the principles of behaviorism work in a lot of basic circumstances, and they work to some degree. They work well for, you know, trying to incentivize and to promote, you know, certain behaviors. And they teach basic lessons and they provide external motivation, but they don't necessarily teach complex thinking skills, right? And they don't necessarily build relationships or help kids to stay regulated. And, you know, many, there's a principle in something called DBT, a type of therapy, that says we're all doing the best we can, and we all need to try harder to do better. And I really like kind of holding that and reminding myself of that, because if we could be doing better, we would. And, you know, many kids who are well behaved, who have sufficient skills, have adaptive behaviors, and it seems like it's easy for them. And then some kids, especially those ones that may be suffering from the derailers that we had mentioned earlier, have maybe lagging skills in certain areas. And so then they present with challenging behaviors. And it's not being willful or that they're, you know, being bad in any way. It's just that they're not able to. So the idea with the collaborative problem solving approach, and it might be especially useful for teens who won't, you know, deal with a top-down kind of adult will authoritarian type of orientation, is to be able to have something that's co-created. So this plan A that's shown here is, you know, more of this authoritarian approach, and this is you can't go run out in the street when there's traffic coming, right? Like you're going to grab your young child and pull them back. But, you know, doing plan A doesn't usually work, you know, for more complex kinds of problems or situations. So next slide, please. So Plan B is really a co-created plan, and this involves trying to identify and understand the child's concerns about the problem. And it's important to start with the child and not with the adult, because there's the risk, especially with younger kids, that the adult will then take over. There's the perception that they're taking over. So it's important to start with the child, and they may not be able to adequately describe the problem because of feeling shy or because of lack of language ability or not being able to name it, but trying to help facilitate that. And then reassuring them that adult will is not the only solution. And then the second step is being able to share the adult's concerns. And then the third step is having the child and the adult work together to brainstorm on solutions. And the key is that this is a co-created process. So, and one key thing to highlight with the bullet point at the bottom is, the idea of relationship and being able to have a good relationship. So back to the special time that Joanne was describing earlier, that if you have other positive experiences, then it makes it a lot easier to work through challenges. And that conflict doesn't have to be something that, is necessarily bad. It can be a healthy way to sort through problems, but it has to be in the context of, solid relationship otherwise. And there is a lot more information if you just look up collaborative problem solving. It's on this website shown at the bottom of this slide, the Think Kids. We'll make the slide available. Next.
So now that we've identified the issues, the emotional behavioral issues, as well as the social determinants, now that we've offered some pearls within our office visit and listened carefully to parents and to the children and validated their concerns and maybe offered a bit of advice on how we can handle challenging behaviors, we pediatricians can also offer a range of resources. And in our presentation here, we've got some kind of divided out by age. So for the really young ones, we know across all ages that mindfulness and mindfulness type practices can be very helpful in managing stress and reducing anxiety. And Sesame Street has recently paired up with Headspace to create what they call monster meditations. And these are available for freely on YouTube, and you can Google these. It's a range of very kid-friendly mindfulness type of activities and meditations to make some of those skills more accessible to the smallest ones. Contrary to popular beliefs, it's not great to just avoid all scary topics altogether, because kids do hear things. And so for more kid-friendly ways to introduce the topics around coronavirus without necessarily inducing a ton of anxiety, there are some guides that are offered here for parents to look at, to kind of help guide their own discussions with kids and to answer questions that they have, along with some suggestions for activities that families can do together just to decrease the stress level in the family. Next slide, please. So moving up in age, for the school age kids and for some of the youth, there's some more like age appropriate kinds of resources also to help introduce ideas about, and discussions about coronavirus and what you can do about it, along with resources that parents will hopefully find helpful as they're trying to manage all those competing responsibilities of homeschooling their kids and managing media time, screen use, and sort of thing. And that's under this common sense media resources for families, everything from schedules to use at home to homeschooling hacks and lots of other things that hopefully that they find useful. The National Child Trauma Network, the NCTSN, has some good information also about ways to help support children and reduce stress during COVID, as well as like fact sheets that are helpful for parents. And finally, the last website here, the Greater Good Science Center, has a magazine that has some good articles targeted towards the teens who are missing their graduations, missing their proms, missing other big social events, and for help in kind of overcoming some of those challenges, as well as general stuff on gratitude and mindfulness and coping with stress. It's good for adults and the adolescents. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, in addition to these resources, which is kind of more like online and accessible for families to use on their own time, some families will need more, and they'll need more intensive support. And so it's good to have some of these referrals in our back pocket to offer to the families that seem particularly stressed. So on the left, we have the parenting crisis lines. They're 24/7 telephone lines that parents can call if they are just like really feeling stressed and need to talk with a calm and understanding and caring adult, just to process some of what they're experiencing, some of what they're feeling, and some of what they're worried about. The one based in San Francisco is called Safe and Sound Family Paths. Is here in Alameda County. Help Me Grow, which is offered by First Five in both the East and the West Bay as well. This is the Alameda County line. They can provide parenting advice directly with families to help manage a number of very common challenging behaviors. And I believe they're still available by telephone, and this is a good resource to offer to families as well. I want to also add that our CAPLI has a new resource, and that's kind of like a second step consultation with a psychologist. Okay, so after you as a primary care doctor consult with one of the CAPLI psychiatrists about behavioral health care management, a second step can be done where a parent can talk directly with a child psychologist about their child's behavior and maybe get some more support and more help. Right now, this is available for the youngest children, ages 0 to 5. Soon we'll be adding a child psychologist with greater expertise and experience with older kids as well. So be on the lookout for that. In addition, especially for our youth, it's good to always be aware of the National Suicide Prevention Hotlines, whether by phone or by text. For social determinants and basic needs, there's always 211, but a relatively new resource that's becoming more widely available is the Find Connect database. So Find Connect is a program that helps connect parents who are being seen in primary care to help with basic needs like housing and food, domestic violence, like safety needs, or a wide range of resources, as well as some mental health resources as well. And this is a publicly facing database. It's hosted by UCSF right now, but that's searchable, and that will let you find maybe the particular resource that your family may need. And then going into, I want to highlight the AP Chapter 1 resources here at the bottom of the page. They did a fantastic job of compiling a range of helpful resources for families and for pediatricians who are dealing with mental health and behavioral issues in children. Next slide, please. So to wrap this up, just hope that we provided a little bit of encouragement in this time. Maybe a little bit of confidence, a little more confidence and some tools to use to help families and children who are under perhaps unprecedented amounts of stress for many right now, or for others who've already been carrying a very, very heavy load and who are getting triggered in the moment. And even though we may all feel like there are limits to what we can do, there's a lot that we can do, and empathic listening and validation are very much part of our toolkit, and something that would be of great value to families right now. As we provide that guidance, to remember the developmental stage of the child, to focus on the strengths and not just on the challenges, and to take a trauma-informed approach, which collaborative, transparent, and open, and just understanding that trauma is very widespread in the community and may be getting triggered in this moment. So I want to take a moment before we go to questions and answers to allow us to reflect. Is there one particular tool that we plan to use, one resource that we want to be able to make more widely available to our families? And with that, I'd like to open things up for questions.
Thank you all so much for joining. And really, if you, I know that some folks can feel varying degrees of shy. So if you want to type in the questions on the chat feature, please feel free to do so. And then we mentioned this at the beginning. So we are wanting to have this, special webinar series right now, thinking about specific concerns related to COVID. And with that, we have also launched a virtual cafe peer support group that is hosted by Michelle Reeder, one of our CAP consultants, and then also Miriam Rue, who's one of our community pediatricians who has a special interest in wellness. And we want to make that available to folks. And one, wanted to make sure that you received information about that. And also, if you can let us know if you do indeed have interest in that, and whether the current timing, that's Wednesday evenings at 8:30, is a suitable time, or if the potential for having it be just after this webinar, which will be on Thursdays 12 to 1, might work to do it for an additional, to go for an hour and a half potentially during this time. And if you'd like to include that on your evaluation form as well, we'd welcome that if you feel like that's a better place to submit your responses.
And I believe many of these resources will be made available on our website if you actually go back and do a deeper dive into some of the websites and some of the resources and some of the ideas and frameworks that were presented here today.
Great. Okay, well, we're at time, so we'll stay on for another minute if folks have questions, but otherwise recognizing that we want to end on time. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.